The IMS roadmap, why this video is different. In October 2025, the International Menopause Society, the world's leading authority on women's midlife health, published their landmark white paper. It was titled The Role of Lifestyle Medicine in Menopausal Health. They reviewed 24 years of global research, and they identified 5 evidence-based pillars, not tips, not trends, not supplements, that measurably reduce menopause symptoms, protect long-term health, and change how a woman's body moves through this transition. This video is that roadmap, step by step. Starting today, if you watched my last video on the 5 things to avoid during menopause, this is the other side of that. That video was about what's working against you. This one is about what works for you, according to the most comprehensive review of menopause lifestyle science ever published. 5 steps in order, with the biology behind each one, and a practical action for today. Before I go through the 5 steps, I want to say something that the IMS white paper itself opens with. Menopause is not a disease. It is a natural transition, and that matters because the way you approach it matters. Women who approach menopause with evidence-based tools, a clear plan, and an understanding of what is actually happening in their body. Those women move through this stage differently, not because their biology is different, because their relationship with their biology is different. That is what this roadmap is designed to give you. The 5 steps I am sharing are backed by the IMS 2025 white paper, the IMS December 2025 recommendations, and the European Society of Endocrinology 2025 clinical practice guidelines, the highest tier of evidence available. But your specific situation requires a conversation with your healthcare provider. With that said, let us build your roadmap. Step 1, eat right. And I want to be very specific about what this means, because eat healthy is one of the most useless pieces of advice a woman in menopause can receive. What the IMS white paper says is more precise than that. It recommends what it calls a plant-forward, anti-inflammatory dietary pattern. The Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet are the 2 most studied patterns. Both are rich in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and olive oil. The research shows these 2 patterns measurably reduce blood pressure, improve cholesterol, reduce vasomotor symptoms, and support healthier weight during the menopause transition. Now, let me explain why food has such a direct relationship with menopause symptoms. Specifically, when estrogen declines, your body's inflammatory baseline rises. You no longer have the same hormonal buffer that was keeping inflammation in check. Food is the most powerful lever you have to control that inflammation. An anti-inflammatory diet, olive oil, fatty fish, berries, leafy greens, nuts, directly counters the inflammatory environment that estrogen decline creates. A pro-inflammatory diet, refined sugars, processed foods, trans fats, makes that environment significantly worse. Every meal is either working with your biology or against it during this transition. 3 specific nutrients the IMS recommends prioritizing during menopause. First, protein. The recommendation is 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight daily. This is higher than general population guidelines because estrogen decline accelerates muscle loss, a process called sarcopenia, and adequate protein is essential to slow it. Second, calcium. The IMS recommends 700 to 1,200 milligrams daily for women over 50 because bone mineral density loss accelerates significantly in the first years after menopause. Third, vitamin D, 400 to 600 IU daily, rising to 800 to 1,000 IU for women with limited sun exposure. Vitamin D is essential for calcium absorption. Without adequate levels, calcium intake cannot do its job. Sarah, 49 years old, had been gaining weight around her abdomen for 2 years, despite no significant changes to her diet. Her doctor told her it was just menopause. She started tracking her protein. She was getting around 45 grams per day, less than half the IMS recommended amount for her body weight. She shifted to eggs at breakfast, Greek yogurt as a snack, fish or legumes at dinner. Within 8 weeks, she noticed less bloating, more energy, and the scale had moved for the first time in a year. Nobody told me I was essentially starving my muscle, she said. I thought I was eating enough. I wasn't eating the right things. The practical action for step 1. Today, you do not need to overhaul your entire diet. The research shows that small, sustained changes compound over time. One specific shift: add 1 serving of oily fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel to your meals twice a week. This single change begins addressing the omega-3 deficiency that drives much of the inflammatory load in menopausal women. Add a handful of nuts as a daily snack. Swap refined grain products for whole grain versions where possible. And check your protein at breakfast. It should be at least 20 to 25 grams to count toward the muscle protection goal. Sarah, gaining weight despite no diet changes. Protein intake was 45 grams per day, half the IMS recommendation. Added eggs, Greek yogurt, fish, legumes. Nobody told me I was starving my muscle. I thought I was eating enough. I wasn't eating the right things. Step 2, move every day. Step 2, move every day. And I want to address something immediately. When I say move every day, I do not mean run every day. I do not mean a 60-minute gym session every day. The IMS white paper is very specific about what kind of movement produces the best outcomes for menopausal women. And it is a multi-component approach. Aerobic activity for cardiovascular and metabolic health. Resistance training for muscle and bone preservation. Flexibility work for joint mobility. Balance training for fall prevention. Not one of these alone. All 4, combined, consistently. Why does exercise have such a direct effect on menopause symptoms? The biology is clear. Exercise triggers the release of endorphins and serotonin, both of which are depleted by estrogen decline. It reduces cortisol, the stress hormone that is chronically elevated in many menopausal women. It increases insulin sensitivity, which counters the metabolic shift toward insulin resistance that menopause accelerates. And resistance training specifically creates mechanical load on bones, the single most effective non-pharmacological intervention for preventing the bone density loss that begins at menopause. The IMS white paper concludes that a consistent multi-component exercise routine improves vasomotor symptoms, preserves muscle and bone mass, enhances cardiovascular fitness, and boosts mental well-being simultaneously. The research on vasomotor symptoms and exercise is particularly compelling. A 2025 analysis published in Climacteric found that women who maintained consistent aerobic exercise reported significantly fewer hot flashes and night sweats compared to sedentary women. The mechanism is thermoregulatory. Regular cardio exercise raises your thermoregulatory threshold, meaning your body becomes more efficient at managing heat. The hot flash threshold literally shifts. This is not a small effect. It is clinically meaningful for women whose hot flashes are significantly disrupting daily life and sleep. Emma, 51 years old, had stopped exercising after a knee injury 2 years before menopause began. By the time she was in full perimenopause, her hot flashes were waking her up 3 to 4 times per night. She could not run, but she could swim, and she could lift. She started with 20 minutes of water aerobics 3 times a week, plus 2 sessions of light resistance training. 12 weeks later, her night flashes had dropped from 4 per night to 1. Her gynecologist was direct with her. The exercise did that. Nothing else changed. The practical action for step 2. Today. If you are not currently exercising, the most important thing is to start small and start consistently. 3 20-minute walks per week, plus 2 15-minute resistance sessions with body weight, resistance bands, or light weights is enough to begin activating the bone, muscle, and cardiovascular benefits the research describes. The goal is not perfection. The goal is consistency over weeks and months. The IMS white paper emphasizes that enjoyment is a key factor in adherence. Choose movement you will actually repeat. That is the only type of exercise that works long term. Step 3, protect your sleep. Of all 5 steps in this roadmap, this is the one the IMS white paper gives special emphasis to. Here's what they write. Sleep is a critical regulator of multiple body systems, influencing everything from cognitive function to bone health to cardiovascular risk to metabolic regulation. They are not describing sleep as rest. They are describing sleep as a biological maintenance system and one that menopause directly disrupts. Let me explain the biology of why menopause and sleep are so deeply connected. During perimenopause, two mechanisms drive sleep disruption. The first is hormonal. Declining estrogen and progesterone both have sleep regulatory effects. Progesterone, in particular, has a direct sedative action. Its decline removes a natural sleep aid that your body had been using for decades. The second mechanism is thermoregulatory. Night sweats and hot flashes fragment sleep architecture by forcing the body out of deep sleep stages to manage heat. The result is that menopausal women often spend time in bed, but do not reach the restorative slow wave sleep that repairs tissue, consolidates memory, and regulates metabolism. What does poor sleep actually cost a menopausal woman? The IMS white paper is precise about this. Poor sleep quality is linked with impaired cognitive function, specifically the brain fog that so many women describe during menopause. It is linked with lower bone mineral density, meaning disrupted sleep accelerates the bone loss that menopause already initiates. It is linked with metabolic dysregulation. Poor sleep raises cortisol, increases ghrelin, decreases leptin, and drives the kind of appetite and weight changes that feel completely disconnected from food choices. And it is linked with elevated cardiovascular risk. Sleep is not passive. Losing it costs something specific from every body system. The IMS white paper recommends cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBT-I, as a first-line non-pharmacological intervention for chronic sleep disruption in menopausal women. CBT-I is not a supplement, it is not a drug. It is a structured program that directly addresses the psychological and behavioral patterns that maintain insomnia. Multiple clinical trials show it is as effective as sleep medication for chronic insomnia, and the benefits persist after treatment ends in a way that medication benefits do not. If your sleep has been consistently disrupted for more than 3 months, CBT-I is worth asking your healthcare provider about specifically. Maria, 53 years old, had not slept more than 4 continuous hours in 18 months. She had tried melatonin, magnesium, sleep sprays, weighted blankets, moderate improvement, nothing lasting. She did a 6-week CBT-I program online. The first 2 weeks were harder. By week 4, her sleep window had consolidated. By week 6, she was sleeping 6 continuous hours for the first time in a year and a half. I did not need more products, she told me. I needed to change my relationship with the bed. CBT-I taught me that in 6 weeks. The practical actions for step 3. Today, establish a consistent wake time even on weekends. This is the single most powerful anchor for your circadian rhythm and the foundation of sleep consolidation. Keep your bedroom temperature cool, ideally between 16 and 18 degrees Celsius. This directly counters the thermoregulatory challenge of night sweats. Limit screen exposure in the 60 minutes before bed. Blue light suppresses melatonin production, and if your sleep disruption is severe, speak to your doctor specifically about CBT-I. It is the most evidence-supported intervention available outside of pharmacological treatment. Step 4. Build mental resilience. And I want to be careful with this language because mental health in the context of menopause is often treated as secondary, as if physical symptoms are the real problem and psychological well-being is a secondary concern. The IMS white paper directly challenges that framing. It states that psychological health significantly influences how women experience menopause, and that anxiety, low mood, and stress do not just accompany menopause symptoms, they amplify them. The relationship runs in both directions. Managing psychological health is not optional self-care. It is a direct biological intervention. Here is the specific mechanism. During menopause, estrogen decline disrupts serotonin and dopamine regulation, the two primary neurotransmitters involved in mood stability. Simultaneously, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, your stress response system, becomes more reactive. Cortisol rises more easily and takes longer to return to baseline. This creates a physiological state where anxiety, irritability, low mood, and emotional reactivity are not psychological failures. They are predictable consequences of the hormonal environment. Understanding this matters because it changes how a woman responds to her own experience. When you know the mechanism, you stop blaming yourself for the symptoms. The evidence base for mindfulness in menopause specifically is now substantial. A 2024 meta analysis published in Menopause reviewed 11 randomized controlled trials. A mindfulness based interventions reduced anxiety and depression scores significantly in menopausal women. They also reduced the subjective severity of hot flashes, not by reducing body temperature, but by changing the psychological response to the heat. Women who practiced mindfulness regularly reported that hot flashes felt less distressing and less disruptive, even when the physiological event was the same. The cognitive response to the symptom changed. That is the power of this intervention. It does not require the symptom to disappear to reduce its impact. The IMS white paper also emphasizes the value of professional psychological support, specifically CBT, for moderate to severe anxiety or depression during the menopause transition. This is not a last resort. CBT has a strong evidence base for menopause specific mood symptoms and is recommended as a first line option before or alongside pharmacological approaches. If your mood changes have been significant, persistent low mood, anxiety that is affecting daily function, emotional reactivity that feels out of proportion, that is a clinical symptom deserving clinical support, not just a breathing exercise. Lisa, 47 years old, described the first year of perimenopause as feeling like she had lost herself. She was crying without knowing why. She was snapping at her family. She felt a pervasive low-grade anxiety that had no clear cause. She had always been a together person. Now she did not recognize herself. She started an 8-week mindfulness program, 20 minutes a day. By week 3, she noticed she was responding rather than reacting. By week 6, her husband said she seemed back. I thought I was losing my mind, she told me. I was losing my estrogen. It turns out those are not the same thing. The practical action for step 4. Today, start with one specific practice, a 5-minute mindful breathing exercise first thing in the morning before you look at your phone. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 6. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system and sets a lower cortisol baseline for the day. If your psychological symptoms are significant, ask your healthcare provider specifically about CBT or a mindfulness-based stress reduction program. These are not alternative wellness products. They are clinically validated interventions recommended in International Menopause guidelines. Step 5, stay connected. This is the step that most surprises women when I explain the full extent of the research behind it. We tend to think of social connection as emotionally beneficial. Good for well-being, nice to have. The IMS white paper presents a different picture. Strong social connections are associated with lower risks of heart disease, diabetes, and osteoporosis. They are associated with fewer vasomotor symptoms. They are associated with better cognitive outcomes and reduced risk of dementia. Community engagement and positive relationships can literally extend longevity. Loneliness is not just uncomfortable, it is physiologically harmful. The mechanism through which loneliness affects the body is direct. Loneliness activates the body's threat response. It raises cortisol, increases inflammatory markers, and disrupts sleep. In the context of menopause, where cortisol is already elevated, inflammation is already higher, and sleep is already disrupted. Loneliness amplifies every existing vulnerability. The reverse is equally true. Research consistently shows that women with strong social support networks show lower inflammatory cytokine levels, better cortisol regulation, and more stable mood during the menopause transition. Connection is not a supplement, it is a biological input. We also know that loneliness and social isolation carry a specific cognitive risk in midlife women. The March 2026 study in Menopause Society Journal, 903 women tracked across perimenopause, found that women with the highest levels of loneliness and social isolation had an 8-fold higher risk of cognitive decline compared to those with strong social support. That is not a minor finding. That is one of the strongest risk signals in the menopause research landscape, and it is largely invisible in the clinical conversation about menopause care. The practical action for step 5. Today, this is the one step where start small is genuinely the right approach because social habits are the hardest to build from zero. Now, one specific commitment: schedule one social interaction this week that you have been putting off. A phone call, a coffee, a walk with someone, not a grand plan to rebuild your social life. One interaction. The research on social behavior change is consistent. Small, consistent acts of connection compound into the kind of social network that produces the health outcomes the IMS white paper describes. Connection, like the other 4 steps, is a practice, not an event. Your roadmap starts today. These 5 steps are your roadmap, not because I designed them, because the International Menopause Society, the world's leading authority on women's midlife health, published them in October 2025 as the evidence-based framework for managing menopause through lifestyle. Eat right, move every day, protect your sleep, build mental resilience. Stay connected. Each step addresses a specific biological mechanism that menopause disrupts. Each one has a research base. Each one has a practical starting point. None of them require a prescription. All of them require commitment. I want to be honest with you about something. None of these 5 steps will reverse menopause. Nothing will. Menopause is not a problem to be solved. It is a transition to be navigated. What these steps do is change the conditions of that navigation. They reduce the severity of symptoms, protect the organ systems that menopause puts at risk, and give you a biological foundation that makes the transition smoother, healthier, and more on your own terms. That is what the research says. That is what this roadmap is for. Drop a comment below. Tell me which of the 5 steps you are already doing and which one you are going to start today. I read every single comment and reply personally with guidance for your specific situation. And if you know a woman going through this who does not have a roadmap, share this video with her. She deserves this information. I will see you in the next one.